Okay, we're picking up where we left off in our last video. In the last video, we talked about how to teach math to your homeschoolers from the foundations, kindergarten through second grade. In this video, we're talking about the middle section, the third grade through sixth grade. And this is from the perspective of somebody that may not want to use a formal curriculum. I did, just to reiterate that I did use formal curriculum for math all the way through, but I leaned very lightly on it. It was just one of the tools that we used to teach math. So, are you ready? We're focusing on arithmetic. You get no golden ribbon, blue ribbon for pushing your kids too fast through math. It's not something to brag about if your 4-year-old loves quadratic equations and is inching towards calculus. You want to make sure their foundations are solid. So if you have kids younger than second grade, 8-ish, go back and watch the foundations video because it's so important that we don't, number one, push kids too fast because most kids are not mathematicians, but it's also so important that they get those foundations through play in everyday life. It's critical. And it will feel too slow for you at first, but they will get there in the end. So we're talking about third through sixth grade in arithmetic. We're talking about expanding their basic arithmetic skills and starting to introduce algebra type concepts. Again, I'm going to circle back and I'm going to say, I made the mistake of not emphasizing mathematical vocabulary when the kids were young. It's so important that you learn and use the vocabulary of math. The same way that if you were going to be baking bread, you would be talking about yeast and rising and activating and kneading and baking, because everything has its own set of vocabulary. And you want to say that as a broken record. Everything has its own set of vocabulary, and find opportunities to speak that over your children all the time. When they're building a new Lego set, when you're having work done on your car, whenever you hear a word spoken to you in the presence of your children that you know they don't know yet, you say, I don't know what that word means, but I do know that everything has its own set of vocabulary. What does that mean? And let that other person speak to you, but model somebody that is expanding their vocabulary. So the vocabulary of this stage in math will have to do with things like product, multiplication, quotient, division, factors, the numbers being multiplied together, multiples of numbers, right? 4, 8, 12, 16 multiples of 4, numerator and denominator, the top number and the bottom number of a fraction. So important that you use those actual words. In this section, the things that your kids will be learning in this age-ish between third grade and sixth grade are some advanced arithmetic, some number properties, some geometry, and some pattern and sequencing. So let's roll up our sleeves. The first thing is that the kids are going to master multiplication and division facts up to 12s. So they should know 11 times 12, 12 times 9, 8 times 7, those types of things. But get the flashcards that are triangles that have the whole family of a product of a problem together. So it'll have 8, 7, 56 on the card. And the kids will memorize those 3 facts together as a math fact family. And if they know 8 times 7 is 56, then you use words like, then you already know the other 3 things. You know 7 times 8 is 56. You know 56 divided by 8 is 7, and 56 divided by 7 is 8. Super powerful. Triangle flashcards. They're also going to learn to understand and work with fractions. Equivalent fractions, fractions that have different numbers, but they represent the same. Use food as often as possible for these. But you're also going to be working on fractions in terms of equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions in this stage of learning. They're also going to be learning to work with decimals, adding, subtracting, and the basic understanding of place value, including the decimal places. Okay, so that's like advanced arithmetic stuff. They're just moving up the arithmetic ladder. The next section is they're going to be learning number properties. Now, you may not know the vocabulary for these. You may not know the properties for these, but you want to lean into these because if they go on to higher mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, calculus, they will use these words and these properties all the time. And they're as simple as knowing the property of zero for multiplication. Any number times zero is zero. So you're going to want to learn properties like the commutative property, the associative property, and the distributive property. Okay. You're also going to want to learn and have them understand the difference between prime numbers and composite numbers. So prime numbers are numbers that you can only get to by multiplying by 1 and itself, like 7. A composite number, you can get there different ways, like 6. You can get there 6 times 1, but you can also get there 2 times 3. Okay, so composite versus primes. Now, a trick and something that I would highly, highly recommend is that your kids memorize their primes. If you start to see that they're leaning towards being a mathematician, memorize the primes up through 500. There aren't that many. And not all of my children did this, but my mathematician absolutely memorized all of his primes. So number properties, you're also going to be working with and understanding what you do with even numbers versus odd numbers. So you have your basic arithmetic, you have your number properties. The next thing is the geometry. You're going to be understanding and working with basic measurements of shapes, length, area, perimeter, volume, those types of things, right? And you're also going to be understanding different types of angles and shapes. How many angles are there in a square? How many angles are there in a circle? How many angles are there in a trapezoid or a triangle, right? So you've got arithmetic, working with the numbers. You've got number properties. Hey, if the numbers are grouped in this way, then they always respond in this way, that type of stuff. Geometry, measuring and understanding shapes even more. And then you're going to start dealing with and practicing patterns and sequences, understanding numerical patterns and understanding what a sequence is in math and solving simple problems using patterns and relationships. Remember, math is about getting to the right answer, but there's multiple ways to get there. And you're looking for the way that you learn best. That's what you're talking to your kids about. There's multiple ways to get to this answer, but I'm going to teach you different ways over the next few years, and you're going to find your favorite ways to work with numbers. But math is always about looking for the patterns inside how you solve things. So what kinds of activities can you do if you don't do formal curriculum? Again, I did use formal curriculum. And as the math got harder, I would lean more towards the curriculum to see what type of problems they were practicing. And honestly, we did most of our math on the window with a dry erase marker because I had very busy boys. And yes, we worked on paper, but we did most of the math on the window. You can use real life examples to practice things like fractions and decimals. Incorporate and include your kids every time you cook. Purpose to double your recipes. Purpose to cut recipes by a third and work with your decimals and fractions right there in the kitchen, fractions in the kitchen, decimals in shopping. We did things like we took our favorite recipes. We have a big family, 5 kids. So if I doubled, tripled, or quadrupled a recipe, we would do the math and we would amend the recipe so that the numbers were right there. And the kids got very familiar with how to use fractions and how to make them bigger and how to make them smaller. With the decimals, when you're at the grocery store, we did this every time. I would always find at least one opportunity to compare two different products in the grocery store. We would look at it by price, we would look at it by the ounce, and we would talk about how you added things together. So just real life problems, real life situations. The other thing that you can do is you can play games. There are so many games out there. If you can think of it, somebody's created it. Meaning, if you just go to Amazon and you go games about fractions, stuff will pop up. Games about decimals, things will pop up. Games about place value, things will pop up. And then you can practice word problems regularly because they help. Those are the real world problems. There are sites online, the word problem of the day, which are great to work together. I'm writing it down so that I'll share that link with you. The word problem of the day. In this age group, I still love Evan Moor products for mathematics because, like I said in the last video, they have you do just enough math to get enough practice in, but they keep the lessons simple enough that they're easy for parents and students alike to understand. So I will put the link below for Evan Moor as well. Don't overthink math. If you can imagine that you have years, you have 3 or 4 years in this stage to work on these things. So you just do a little bit at a time and you get there at the end. In the last video, we're going to be talking about the preparation that you do right before algebra. And it is the last stage that I believe most homeschooled kids need to actually understand and learn. I do not believe algebra is for everybody, although the basic algebra concepts are really good to touch bases on. So we'll touch bases in the next video, and I hope this helps. I can't wait to read your comments about how this is helping you. You do not need to overthink math. I promise you, it's not as hard as people make it.